Hello everyone, today in this video I am going to deal with the fourth chapter of A Pact with Son of class 6th. The title of this story is The Old Clock Shop. This story is about the owner of the clock shop. He is a deaf man. He is working in his shop and he was just about to close his shop. Then suddenly two strangers entered his shop with a gun in their pocket. This old man, no doubt, he became afraid, but without losing his calm and composure, he managed the situation and he was successfully able to avoid that situation. So let's say in the story that how this old man managed to come out of that situation. Christmas Eve had arrived. As last-minute shoppers were going home, a thick white sheet of snow lay over Salt Lake City, USA. So the Christmas celebration was in the air. It was the time of Christmas festival and everyone was there out for shopping. And here it is said last-minute shoppers. Last-minute shoppers refers to the person who is out for shopping at the closing hours of the shop. And here it is said that the whole street was covered with snow. Why? Because it's winter season. As we all know that Christmas is celebrated during the month of December and which is winter season. And this story, the old clock shop, is situated in the city of Salt Lake City, which is in USA. Yet the lights were still burning in the old clock shop as Ray, its old deaf owner, worked on a clock he had sold that day. Now here we are introduced to the central character of this story, that is Mr. Ray. He is an old man, he is deaf. He was there in his shop and therefore lights were still burning and he was working on a clock which he had sold that day. It means perhaps during the daytime he has sold a clock, but it may be that there would have been some problem with that clock and therefore the customer had returned it to him and he was trying to restore it. Having finished his work, Ray stood up and was on his way to the back room when a cold rush of air from the front door hit the back of his neck. So Mr. Ray, he has restored that clock which he was working upon, and now therefore he stood up and he was going into the back room which was there in the shop hall. So as he turned back in order to go into that back room, what he felt rush of air from the front door. It means someone has opened the door of the shop and therefore as it was cold outside, therefore cold air came inside the shop, which he felt on the back of his neck. It means there was some visitor in his shop. He turned to meet a last-minute shopper, but his old wise eyes told him that this was not a shopper. So as soon as he felt the cold rush of air in the back of his neck, he turned around. Why he turned around? To greet the last-minute shopper. It means the customer which has come into his shop. So as soon as he turned back, he had a look over that customer who was there in the shop. He was able to figure out that this customer is something strange. There is something strange in that customer. He was not a customer. He was not a shopper. He was not there to buy something, but he was there with some other intention. He saw two men, one in his 20s, the other closer to 50. So there were two men, one in his 20s, it means he was around 20 years old, and the another man, he was around 50 years old. The younger man remained at the door. The older man approached the counter with no sign of friendliness in his eyes. Ray was able to hide his growing fear as he slowly pushed a notepad and a pencil across the counter. The younger man, who was in his 20s, it means who was around 20 years old, he remained at door only, and the man who was around 50-year-old, what he did, he came into the shop and he came nearer to the counter. And Mr. Ray, he was noticing him, the way he was walking, the brightness of his eyes, everything shows something evil. It means he was there with some evil intention, perhaps to harm Mr. Ray. And as soon as he noticed all these things, Mr. Ray, he was alarmed. No doubt he became afraid, but he did not panic. He remained calm and composed, and what he did, he pushed a notepad and a pencil across the counter. As in the first paragraph only, it is being said that he was deaf. So definitely, in order to communicate with the customer, what he used to do, he used to write over the pad. So therefore, what he did, he put a notepad and a pencil across the counter in order to communicate with the customer, the strange customer who was there in his shop. Here in this photograph, here you can see this man, he is the customer, and this is Mr. Ray, and both of them are exchanging words perhaps. He smiled at the unfriendly face, then pointed to his ears and shook his head from side to side. So Mr. Ray, as he used to treat other customer in the same manner, he smiled at the unfriendly face. It means the person, the strange man who was there in his shop. And what he did, he pointed to his ears and shook his head from side to side. It means he made a gesture in order to let him know, in order to tell him that he is deaf, he will not be able to listen what he will say. So he indicated with his gesture that he is a deaf man. A quick look of surprise changed the man's face as he studied the notepad and then turned and said something to his friend. So the stranger, as soon as he come to know that Mr. Ray is deaf, his facial expression changed. There was some change in his expression. And then he read the note which was written over the notepad. Over the notepad also, Mr. Ray wrote that he is a deaf. So the man, the stranger, as soon as he come to know this, what he did, he turned back and he said something to his friend who was around 20-year-old standing at the gate, standing outside the shop. Ray used the chance to look closely at the man, paying attention to the shape of gun and a restless hand in the man's right coat pocket. So while this stranger, he had turned back and he was saying something to his partner who was standing at the gate, Mr. Ray, he had a close look of the man who was there standing at his counter. So while having a close look it means to check out that man. He was looking at that man minutely. So while he was looking at that man, what he saw, to him it appears that there was a gun in his pocket and his hand was restless. Restless, it means it was nervous, perhaps it was shaking. So this man, he was dangerous, he was harmful to Mr. Ray, and he was there with an evil intention, and therefore he had a gun in the right coat pocket. Anger boiled within him, but it was kept down by an inner voice that said, "Be still." So as soon as Mr. Ray realized that there is a gun in his pocket and he is there with an evil intention, with an ill intention, he became very angry. But an inner voice came. He heard something inside him. And that inner voice asked him to be still, it means to be calm and composed. His inner voice told him not to be angry, as it may be that if he will get angry, the situation may change, and it may be that he will be harmed because he is an old man and he is all alone there in the shop. He wrote on notepad, "May I help you?" For the first time, the older man looked directly at Ray and smiled. A cruel, mocking smile. They both understand why he was there, why his friend remained at the door. They looked like men who were down on their luck and were now ready to try something they would later be sorry about. Down on their luck, it means experiencing a bad situation. So now, Mr. A, first of all, instead of getting angry, he comforted himself, and after that, on that notepad, he wrote, "How may I help him?" He asked him that why he was there in the shop. And after that, both of them, the shopkeeper, that is Mr. Ray, and that strange man, both of them exchanged a look. And Mr. Ray here says that both of them, it means the stranger and the Mr. Ray. Now it was clear to both of them that why he was there, for what purpose that man was there in that shop. So this man, this strange person, perhaps he was facing difficulties, he was in the bad phase of his life, and therefore in order to earn something, what he has done, he has come in Mr. Ray's shop in order to loot his shop. The clocks ticked on. Ray calmly wrote another message. "Have you come to pick up a clock or watch?" As we have seen in the previous paragraph that Mr. Ray wrote on the notepad, "How I may help you." But this man, this strange person, he gave no reply to his question. Therefore, he again wrote, "Have you come to pick up a clock or watch?" So he asked to the stranger that have you given your clock or watch for the repair, and have you come to collect it? Then he pointed to the loan board filled with hanging clocks and pocket watches. He was not a pawnbroker, but at the same time could not say no to the needy people who placed their old watches or clock before him for anything they could get. So when Mr. Ray asked him that have you come to pick up a clock or watch, then that strange man, he pointed toward the board which was hanging in one side of that shop, and there it was written loan. So Mr. Ray, he used to provide loan to the needy person, and here it is said that he is not a pawnbroker. Pawnbroker, it means a person who lends money in exchange of objects. So anyone who was in need of money, they used to come to him, and the person used to leave his watch or clock with Mr. Ray, and in return Mr. Ray used to give some amount to that person. He loaned more than he should. They would be there when the owners wanted them back at the same price he had paid with no interest. So this person, Mr. Ray, he was doing this not in order to earn profit, but in order to help the person who was in need. So whosoever come to him, he was not able to deny that person. He was not in a habit to say no to anyone. So whenever anyone visited his shop asking for loan, whether his watch was deserving or not, but he used to give loan, he used to lend loan to that person. And the day they used to come to return to pay back the amount which they have taken from Mr. Ray, on that day he used to return the clock submitted by the owner. And for this he never charged any interest. It shows that he was helping man, he was quite generous, he was kind-hearted person. Then the older man seemed to feel a little easier. took out his hand from his pocket and quickly looked at the watch on his wrist. "How much will you give me for this?" the man wrote. So as soon as the stranger said to Mr. Ray that he was there for loan in order to borrow some money from Mr. Ray, Mr. Ray became quite calm and composed, because before that he was afraid, and as he had sensed, he had seen something like gun in the pocket of that strange man. Therefore he was angry also, and he was nervous also at the same time. But as soon as he come to know the intention of that person, now he was calm and composed. And after that, Mr. Ray, he looked at the watch which the stranger was wearing on his wrist. Then the stranger wrote a message for Mr. Ray on the piece of paper, on the notepad which was there on the counter, asking him that how much will he pay for that wristwatch which he was wearing. Ray noticed a little shame in the grey eyes looking at him. The watch was nothing special and yet had great powers. It was something to exchange a way out of bad situation. So Mr. Ray, he read the eyes of that strange man, and it seems to him that he was feeling ashamed. He was a little bit ashamed of himself. Why he was ashamed? Because there he was with an evil intention, but when he came to know that this person he is deaf, and instead of those challenges, those physical disabilities, was trying his best to earn his bread. He was not asking for alms, he was not begging, he was not looting anyone, but he was working day and night. He realized that. He felt a little bit ashamed. So now Mr. Ray, he was looking at the watch which he wanted to submit it to Mr. Ray, and in return, in exchange, he wants some loan, few amount of loan from Mr. Ray. So Mr. Ray, he examined that watch. It was not worthy, it was not expensive, it was not any, there was nothing special, in it, but at that moment it was only the way to get out of that situation, that bad situation. If he would have denied him to offer loan in exchange of that watch, it may be that the situation may get worse. And therefore, what he did not deny, he did not say anything, because he knew that the person was there with a bad intention, and granting him loan will be the only way to get out of it. Therefore, let's see what he did. Knowing that the great need had brought the man to his shop in the first place, Ray asked, "How much do you need for it?" The reply came back on the notepad, "Whatever it's worth." Somewhere, Mr. Ray, he sensed that this man who was there standing on his counter, he was needy. It is not that he was a bad person, but due to the situation, due to circumstances, he had been there. He was standing there in front of Mr. Ray. And as Mr. Ray, he was a very kind-hearted person. Therefore, he asked him that how much money did he need. In reply to his question, the stranger who was standing on the counter, he said that whatever it's worth, it means whatever will be the price of that watch, he can lend him that much amount of money. Ray reached into his cash box, pulled out a $50 note, and passed it into the man's hand. As they shook hands, Ray looked into the man's eyes. They seemed to say thank you. They both knew the watch wasn't worth that much. Before turning to leave, the man wrote, "I will be back to pick it up as soon as I can. Merry Christmas." So Mr. Ray, what he did? He gave $50 note to that man. And after giving him $50 note, both of them shook hands. And Mr. Ray, he could read the eye of that person. It seems to him just he had that gesture that he wants to thank him. It was because that man, that stranger, he knew it very well that the watch which he had exchanged with the Mr. Ray, it did not worth $50. It was not that much expensive. But as Mr. Ray, as he was a wise person and a very kind-hearted person, in order to get out of that situation and in order to help that man, what he had done, he had given $50 to that strange man. And even that strange man, he could sense that this man, he knew why I am there, and perhaps he could understand my situation, and therefore in order to help me out, he is giving me such a generous amount of money in exchange of the watch which do not deserve $50. And after that strange man, he wrote on the notepad that he will come very soon in order to pay the loan, that is $50 to Mr. Ray. He will return back soon in order to pay that loan which he has taken from Mr. Ray, and then he will collect his wristwatch which he has submitted as collateral. And then he wished Merry Christmas to Mr. Ray. The little story ended on the half an hour with the clocks striking all together. The timepieces, which had been looking on silently all the while, rang out the time with such feeling that even Ray thought he could hear them. All these things, this scene continued. It lasted for half an hour in the shop of Mr. Ray. And after half an hour, at the end of that scene which was going on in the shop between Mr. Ray and the stranger, all this lasted on for half an hour, and as it ended, all the clock which was there in the shop, it started ringing. The clocks with pendulum, it used to ring at every hour. So perhaps the 1 hour has completed, and therefore all the clocks started ringing simultaneously at the same time. And that day, that the ringing sound of clocks seemed something different to Mr. Ray, and therefore that day even he heard it minutely. And it seems to him that all the clocks in the shop, present in the shop, they all were looking silently. They were the spectator looking silently at the scene which was going on in the shop. And perhaps they all were congratulating Mr. Ray. Why they were congratulating Mr. Ray? Because he has been successfully able to come out of the situation, because it may be that he may have got hurt as the stranger was possessing a gun in his pocket, but without shedding a single drop of blood, without harming, without creating any nuisance, Mr. Ray was successfully able to avert that situation, and therefore the clock started ringing. Their sweet musical message was filled with hope. The timeless message of peace on earth, goodwill towards all, was felt by the three men who stood in the clock shop. So it seemed to Mr. Ray that those clocks in the shop, they were perhaps giving a universal message. Their sweet sound, the musical sound which it were producing, it seems to them that there was a hidden message in those musical sounds. And what was that message? Peace on earth, goodwill towards all. That we should never harm anyone. We should always have good intention for others. We should always be ready to help each other. And because of this intention only, Mr. Ray was able to come out of that situation. And as we have seen that as Mr. Ray was generous, he was kind-hearted person, he was ready to help anyone, even that stranger who was there in that shop. Even though he has realized that he was there with an evil intention, but even then he have not denied help to that person, but he has tried his best to help that man. And therefore, in one of the paragraph he has said that it is not that he is a bad man, but due to bad situation, he is standing there posing a gun in his pocket. So it is not that the man is bad, but the situation is bad. And Mr. Ray, with his kind attitude and with his kind gesture, he changed the heart of that person. And therefore this person, without harming Mr. Ray, he wished him, and not only wished him, even he thanked him, and he went out of the shop. So this is how Mr. A was successfully able to avert the situation which could have gone in another way. But with his goodwill, with his good gesture, he was able to save himself from that dangerous situation. So therefore the moral of the story is that we should always have good intention, helping attitude for others. This is all for today. Thank you.